the Coca-Cola can here, you can see. Got pictures of tapes on. If you had a tape player back in the day, you may know what I'm talking about. Great music back in the day of tape players and CD players, floppy disks. Had that back in the day, years ago I think. Went to CDs, and it went to DVDs, went to tapes. Like, I don't mean like cassette players, which could be a cassette player on here, as you can see. Cassette player, as you can see in the can of Coke. You wouldn't have thought that, would you? It says basically scan for a chance of a ticket, which is fair enough. I can fit more videos on a live video than I can actually basically do a pre-recorded video, so the live just keeps filming. A pre-recorded video runs out of space on your memory on your phone. I don't know if you've had the same thing. Guys, girls, ladies and boys and girls, we're going to be looking at this thing on GB News in a minute. I just thought I'd go through my can and what the can is. We all know what a can of Coke is and Coca-Cola. Some people probably prefer Pepsi. But some people drink too much sugary things. Cans of Coke. Depends what they do. But anyway, I better put this GB News on. I had to put a bit more to the story because of the... We have to go to the beginning yet again because of the memory problem. So just give me a second.
Now, the Metropolitan Police's Director of Intelligence has said facial recognition technology has been a game changer for policing, triggering the arrest of alleged criminals every 2 hours.
Yeah, but has this newfound technology permanently changed society, do we think? Let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley and broadcaster Fahima Mohammed. Good to see you both this morning. Fahima, what do you think? Is this a move for good or bad?
Can't even get this all in.
Police has begun with facial recognition technology since 2016, and it has been used intermittently various public spaces and events. However, there's one notable case in the UK where facial recognition technology failed.
I think she's lagging out on her side. Too short. My shoulder's killing me today, obviously.
Suspects. Another case of that technology failure was in the UK with South Wales Police using that technology at the UEFA Champions League final in Cardiff in 2007. And the system, again, misidentified thousands of individuals as potential suspects.
It's like Wales, actually, because of this thing on the van.
Studies, one namely by the University of Essex, found that facial recognition technology used by the Metropolitan Police had an error rate of up to 98%, highlighting the significant shortcomings and risks associated with its implementation and in law enforcement.
Peter, what do you make of it? Fahima says there are shortcomings to this technology.
Yeah, the cases that Fahima references are dated, and the technology which the Met announced yesterday, on which they are triumphing, has been refined, improved beyond recognition, forgive the pun, from what it was just a handful of years ago. It is a source of great joy to be able to trumpet today a wonderful policing story. The police, both in South Wales and the Met, have been extremely courageous in the development and the rollout of this technology, which will undoubtedly keep the public safer because it means wanted people will be taken off the streets. And having done all this with a lack of a regulatory framework, because Parliament really dragged its heels on this, shows considerable courage, innovation, and I applaud the police wholeheartedly.
All right, so if the technology has changed, Fahima, so it is much more reliable than it was before, is that all your objections removed then? All your concerns answered?
No, because at the end of the day, there's still privacy concerns, and there's wide use of facial recognition technology raises significant sort of concerns around the monitoring and the biometric data, and it can be distorted quite a lot as well with regards to, wearing facial masks, makeup, as well as, with your face being used in plastic surgery, and also the bias and inaccuracy with facial recognition systems with regards to particular identification individuals with gender, ethnicity, genders, or ages, leading to potential misidentifications and false positives.
All that, forgive me, all that sounds very complicated, and I don't know if people are really going to latch on to that. But what people will latch on to is the idea of the privacy aspect. and the idea that we're monitored and we will be seen even if we're perfectly innocent. But I've got to ask you, Fahima, do you have a mobile?
Yes, I do.
Right, so you're perfectly aware that whether it's Apple or whether it's Android, that they are tracking every single footstep you take.
Of course, but again, we don't know where this kind of information is going to go. The regulations are still very limited, and which are the third parties and the policies that needs to still really
Sounds a bit like Watch Dogs to me. They played a game called Watch Dogs that can hack into your phone and track where you're going.
So unfortunately, as much as I love technology and it needs to, it's still in its infancy in order to improve its regulations and its actual policies around the privacy, and not having sort of like taking away the civil liberties, as well as not having people feel that they're going to be monitored without their consent.
What do you think of it, Peter?
Fahima's objections are shockingly outdated, and she really needs to bring herself up to speed with the version of this new technology as rolled out this weekend. I'll give you an example that comes from the Director of Intelligence, that if, for example, and she called a man Dave, is walking to the pub and he is captured on facial recognition technology, his image is immediately compared to those people that feature on the wanted list. And if there is not a match, then once again, his image is almost instantaneously deleted.
I mean, the people watch you in the shop, they watch you outside. It's like Big Brother, they watch you everywhere you go.
I would urge you to go and speak to the Information
Madness,
Commissioner's office, because you might
Raises
be able to
every
bring
day.
yourself up to speed and speak a little more accurately.
It is not. It's not because I have a lack of knowledge.
So people just want to get away from bloody cameras and stuff.
That there is still concerns with regards to the privacy, as well as it being a monetary sort of state, which we are going to be at. I totally agree that we do need technology to help the policing, and it definitely needs to be up there. But my concern, and a lot of studies recently has shown that 55%, even from YouGov, and many other research recently that has shown that people have concerns, over 0.5% of the population, with regards to their privacy, as well as not having the consent for it. So it just needs a little bit more tweaking and updating with regards to that sort of policy and that side of things. But I'm not saying that at the end of the day it shouldn't be there. It just needs to be a little bit more transparent with regards to how we can have that kind of consent, so that at the end of the day it's going to be used to the public's interest, more importantly in the way in which that we feel safe ourselves, that our information is going to be safe.
We've got to leave it there. Fahima, Peter, thank you both very much indeed.
Well, I do not know what to say about that.
I could well believe a YouGov survey saying people have...
But see what else is on the TV on a Sunday. We can film or talk about. After the adverts, obviously.
Today marks 6 months since Hamas's October the 7th attack against Israel, where Hamas militants attacked Israeli military bases and also Israeli civilians.
Well, you will remember that more than 1,100 people were killed, 250 people taken as hostages, and about 130 of those are still missing.
Well, the Hamas attack triggered the ongoing military action in the Gaza Strip as Israel tries to destroy the group.
Well, political editor for HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, joins us now. Where are we at the minute, Kevin, with all of this? Because it's been an interesting 6 months, hasn't it, in the outrage in Parliament over what happened, which has slowly shifted now to real concern about how Israel is behaving.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I think there's definitely tension behind the scenes in government. I think it's significant that this morning...
May have to charge my phone at some point, so this may be a short video
Sunday Times
than usual. But
that the UK support for Israel is not unconditional. Slightly stronger language than Rishi Sunak's own message, in which he reiterates
there's David
the
Cameron.
UK government's support for Israel and its support for Israel's right to defend itself. So I think clearly there is some sort of discussion going on behind the scenes in government as to where perhaps the UK needs to draw a line, where obviously, as I say, they are
Time to
supportive of
party.
However, we just saw a few days ago UK aid
Time
workers being killed
to time to
and missile
party.
strikes. So that has definitely caused a lot of concern within government. And David Cameron has been seen, ever since he became Foreign Secretary, as being one of the more sceptical voices, I think, where Israel is concerned. Although he does support Israel, I think he's more inclined to point out where Israel get things wrong.
What's meaning?
What do you think
What did it mean?
this has been the tipping point in the changing of tone from the West?
I mean, I think the tone had been shifting.
Oh, I think not
to
tone, you
that
know.
attack. There had been rising voices of scepticism, not just in Britain, but in America as well. But certainly that has crystallised it and has become a focal point, I think, as for the West to maybe stop and think about where the conflict is going and to what extent the West can continue to support Israel in the way that it has up until now. I think it's also significant that Nancy Pelosi, who is a real ally of Joe Biden, has added her name to calls yesterday for the US to stop arming Israel. So that, I think, is quite a significant development as well.
I mean, look, if one thing, this highlights how difficult the situation is. The problem seems to be, Kevin, that this is incredibly, as we know, it's incredibly nuanced. It always has been in the Middle East. It's an incredibly difficult situation, and yet the public in here and the United States and elsewhere seem to be either very pro-Israeli or very pro-Palestinians, and there doesn't seem to be. It's black and white. There's no grey involved in any of this.
No, you're right. The voices on both sides of the extremes are very loud, and there is no, as you say, grey area meeting in the middle, compromise positions. It's you're either, as you say, pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. I think that makes it very difficult for politicians in particular. We've seen the Labour Party see itself in another civil war over the last 6 months. We've seen Labour councillors resign over it, rebellions against Keir Starmer's position, although Labour's position has moved some way in the last 6 months as well. So yeah, I think that's what makes it much more difficult for politicians to strike a balance. But they do need to strike a balance if there is going to be some sort of resolution to this conflict, which unfortunately doesn't look right now, 6 months on, as if we're any closer to it.
Israel flag in the background in London there. I saw in the background.
The scenes that we're seeing in Israel at the moment, 100,000 people reportedly rallying against the government last night, demanding a Gaza hostage deal. Because I suppose for a lot of people inside Israel, they appear to be so far away from their objectives, which was to destroy Hamas and to free the hostages.
Yeah, absolutely. We see rising concern in Israel as to the tactics of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and what the ultimate aim is. I mean, it's one thing to say that you're going to destroy Hamas. It's much more difficult, as we're seeing, to actually do that in reality. And the hostages, unfortunately, so many hostages are still being held captive, and we're no closer to achieving any sort of deal which would see their release. So it's a pretty difficult situation at the moment, and it's unsurprising, I think, that Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under a lot of internal pressure, although I don't think there's any real suggestion that his position is under any imminent threat.
Okay. Kevin, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. Oh yeah, it is what it is.
Now, the Metropolitan Police's Director of Intelligence has said facial recognition technology has been a game changer for...
I think we've seen this one already, haven't we? We need to find a different one. So let's have a look. Oh yes, planes of war. Interesting.
Philip, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
I heard about war zone.
Lovely weekend. Philip, this was scary. I woke up this morning, and there were several things in this story that scared the life out of me. One, that we should be on a war footing, and the other is that government ministers didn't even bother turning up to any exercises. They sent a minion, a civil servant, instead. What do you make of it all?
I think it's shocking. The first rule of government is to protect the nation, and you can't protect the nation unless you're preparing for it. And if we look at, I've been involved in the international geopolitics game, whether it be in the military or commentating on it and writing on it for over 40 years. And this is the first year that I can see a clear path or several clear paths to World War III. We've got a major war in Europe. In
How's it going?
Ukraine. We've got the Middle East falling apart. We've got China becoming more aggressive in Southeast Asia, and there are ways that those could join together relatively quickly. And
we should be on the war footing in the UK. We don't know with Russia and Ukraine and
together to plan multiple different
many other countries.
How we can defend ourselves. Then you don't get the coordination. The Ministry of Defence itself in 1994 said it would take nearly 4 years' notice and 2 years of preparation to get ready to defend the United Kingdom. If the MOD is not doing it, what hope is there for the other government departments?
So why? I mean, you agree that we are on a pre-war footing, and we should be on a pre-war footing, and the government should be doing more. Why aren't they? Why aren't they taking it seriously, Philip?
Well, I think there's a complacency, and we heard the minister turn around and say that, I was only on an exercise a couple of weeks ago where we're looking at one scenario. Well, that's brilliant, one scenario. But as soon as you start to put multiple scenarios together and the impact on each other, that's where you need an overall response. And if the mechanisms of government, if our communication systems are removed, if Westminster disappears in a big flash, then how is government in the country going to work? Now, those sorts of scenarios are a long way off, if not highly improbable. But going through the process will identify how different government departments can interact better with other departments, can identify what are the key issues that need to be dealt with, can outline savings and efficiencies in the way things are done today.
Hello.
So this should be a routine part of what the government does.
And it's routine that they just don't bother turning up, sending a civil servant minion instead. So, I mean, do you subscribe, Philip, to the thought that we should be talking about a citizens' army? We should be talking about selective conscription. Are we at that stage yet?
A citizens' army is slightly different. It's an undefined term that people have thrown around because it gets sound bites. Selective conscription, if the military can't recruit and retain enough people, and I think last year they lost 5,000 overall if you compare those that are leaving and those that are coming in. There's going to have to be some form of selective recruitment, and we should be looking at expanding the military. That's good for our economy. That's very good for our economy at the moment, just so that we prepare, because to get ready for the potential conflict scenarios that are there will take 2 to 5 years, if not longer.
Cheers, thanks.
Start now. We're not sending a clear message to those that want to do us harm. That increases the possibility of them coming to do us harm. But if we start to prepare, they'll look at it and go, well, no, we'll not do this. And we're not going to lose out. It costs a lot of money whenever you look at it as just a single figure going into the Ministry of Defence. But most of that money is reinvested back in the country again. So it's good.
There's been a criticism also of sort of people aren't being recruited because we're concentrating too much on, the twin evils, as some people call them, of inclusivity and diversion, rather than concentrating on getting people who can just get out there and fight and do the job. I mean, do you think that has been a problem with recruitment recently?
I think there's a lot of that. The military is too PC. I talk to people across the military all the time, and they're having to jump through hoops and to do things that are disabling, and they're not being looked after in their accommodation. They're not being looked after in the terms.
That says Birmingham there, as you can see.
Military pay at the more junior levels is terrible. At the more senior levels, is significant. But the Ministry of Defence in the Chief of Defence People's area has got an inclusiveness and diversity 2-star civil servant. Now that's a general rank that's in there, who's paid over £100,000 a year.
Wow.
With a complete department of people looking at things. I've seen zero beneficial output from that department, and they're all on final salary pensions. So Ministry of Defence is wasting money hand over fist on a lot of this, like a lot of other government departments are doing as well.
Well, how are we ever going to go into a war zone? Do we need to get prepared for war in case it does kick off? Because eventually it may kick off. And all of us have to be prepared in the UK to fight a war zone and to get big and strong. So, I don't know. It may happen, it may not, but you never know. Men and women are going to have to start fighting. If the basically if Poland can't hold Russia back, they're going to fight through. So who will defend the UK? Would it be France?
Philip.
I'm sure France will probably try and help. Or they'll probably defend their own country more than likely. So let's have a look here. I think I can get one more video in before the phone goes in a flat.
Sheer hypocrisy of the West is staggering. Who can forget the October 7th, 2023, a day that is etched in my mind as a day when humanity lost its cool and barbarism took over. Hamas crossed the border and executed in the most horrendous fashion 1,200 civilians going about their lives in a peaceful manner in Israel. The details of the crime they committed were shocking. Their aim to kill Jews, raping and pillaging in their wake. And I've seen some of the footage. I've been to the Tunnels exhibition, which gave an insight into what the hostages have had and are, if any of them are still alive, having to put up with. Israel obviously retaliated. We would expect any government to retaliate. They demanded a release of the hostages and returned fire, aiming to expose and destroy Hamas, a declaration of war on Gaza. And war has been raging ever since. The casualties in Gaza are high. But the tipping point came when an aid convoy leaving Gaza came under Israeli fire, killing all 7 of its occupants, 3 of which were British.
It's a shame they did die. They didn't deserve that. They were trying to do a charity for people to help with food from the UK, and they got targeted and blown up.
Really? With David Cameron leading the charge, saying that support for Israel is not unconditional. So Michael Ellis, the former Attorney General, pointed out that those calling for Britain to stop selling arms are virtue signalling, and I'm inclined to agree with him. He said an arms embargo would be the wrong step strategically, economically and morally, and he's right. For one, we buy more arms off Israel than they do us, and secondly, the UK's reputation as a reliable arms exporter could be compromised. Here's the thing. Israel are fighting Hamas, an organisation that does not subscribe to international law, an organisation whose masters are harboured in Qatar, a country who, ironically, we license the most amount of arms to. How ridiculous. Are we suggesting that Israel, who are a fellow democracy and also fighting Hezbollah in the north, should simply capitulate to make us all feel better? Virtue signalling, if ever I did hear it. Civil servants are refusing to work, saying that they may be complicit in breaching international law, which hasn't yet fully been determined, is what is happening. Please. A lot of people don't know this or have conveniently forgotten. But before October the 7th, Hamas were firing rockets at Israel for as long as I can recall. So Israel invested in an iron dome to protect itself rather than retaliate.
Please,
Israel invested in keeping its citizens safe, Hamas or Gaza invested in tunnels to store munitions and hide their activities, the tunnels enabling them to evade Israel's scrutiny. There is no time for this virtue signalling baloney. War is a deadly business. Of course my heart goes out to all those killed from whichever side. But this could all stop today if the world put the same amount of pressure they have on Israel on those behind Hamas and insist that Hamas stop firing the missiles and return the hostages. If they embargoed Hamas, the war would stop. If they embargoed Israel, Israel would be annihilated.
I don't know what to make of that. I'd blame it on Rockstar Games, I think.
Stuff this morning because it is the 7th of April, and that means exactly 6 months since the Hamas attack on Israel, where those Hamas militants attacked military bases, but also those communities. There was a sort of party rave thing going on. Just a most dreadful event.
Well, as you might remember, more than 1,100 people were killed in the attack, with 250 people captured as hostages, with approximately 130 people still remaining in captivity.
Well, of course, that attack triggered what is now the ongoing military action in the Gaza Strip, as Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas.
Well, in marking the 6-month anniversary, the Israeli Prime Minister is facing down protests in the streets, while Rishi Sunak has called for an end to the war.
Well, let's talk to political commentator Peter Spencer, who joins us now. Morning to you, Peter. I mean, it's remarkable that we are 6 months on from this, and the tide is turning somewhat, certainly within Israel, isn't it? Never mind what the likes of the White House and Number 10 are saying.
Absolutely. I mean, the White House and Number 10 and other Western allies are very mindful of the fact that the Hamas attack was the worst atrocity that Israelis had suffered since the Holocaust. But at the same time, subsequent to that, the death toll among Palestinians,
what to say about this?
women and children, is some 30 times the number of people who died in the Hamas attack. And so there has been a growing sense of disquiet that this is starting to look like revenge rather than resolution. And then on top of that, there is, whatever the Israelis say, there's evidence that they're not being very enthusiastic about letting aid get through. And again, there is that burgeoning sense of suspicion that just maybe the Israeli government is using starvation and disease as a weapon of war. And as a consequence of that, the tide has, as you say, Steve, been starting to turn. And then I think the tipping point comes with the slaughter of those 7 aid workers, 3 of them, of course, were British. And so the language is significantly hardening on both sides of the Atlantic. It's worth noting, actually, that Joe Biden a couple of days ago did say that, look, support for Israel is dependent on you guys being a little bit more careful about civilian casualties. And Rishi Sunak, for his part, has called for a humanitarian pause. I mean, he went through the ritual thing of saying, look, we support Israel's right to defend itself, blah, blah, but, and then there was this big but. We are mindful, he said, we are shocked and appalled by the civilian casualty toll, and also we're straining every sinew to get aid in, and implication being you guys aren't exactly helping. And so progressively, the language against Benjamin Netanyahu's prosecution of the war is hardening.
And Peter, what do you make of the scenes inside Israel? Because we've seen a number of protests, haven't we, in the past few days, but they are growing in number. And we now believe there are 100,000 people on the streets last night rallying against the government. They're demanding a Gaza hostage deal, because I suppose to many people in Israel, 6 months on, their goals of destroying Hamas and rescuing the hostages still seem very far away.
Well, they're totally very far away indeed.
Feet.
And I mean, the Netanyahu government wasn't that popular even before all of this stuff happened. Remember, it's a rather coalition of extreme right-wingers, and Israel as a nation is not a right-wing nation. And sure, I think Netanyahu, his response, this kind of the shock and awe response that he has prosecuted to the atrocity, clearly hasn't delivered the goods in terms of spooking the Hamas into handing back the hostages. And so, as you rightly say, Ellie, there are now mass protests in Israel saying, look, you've called this wrong. And of course, the response to that from Netanyahu seems to be to just dig his heels in yet further, because his own political career is very much on the line here.
What do we make, Peter, of the intervention by Boris Johnson, out of politics, but never far away, of course, saying it's totally wrong, the idea that we should stop sending arms to Israel? I mean, the argument being it's the only democracy within the region, it is an ally, a friend.
It's not totally wrong sending
continue to support come what
arms
may.
to Israel.
I mean, that's quite interesting, because
to target our people, should they?
Been
They would have happened.
Look,
then they would have carried on selling arms to Israel.
America is dependent on the Israelis, reining back on slaughtering people wholesale, but he knows that he can't really pull the plug on supplying weapons to the Israelis, because if the Israeli state were to collapse, it leaves the field wide open for other states which are very much hostile to the United States. When it comes to the row within Britain, it is to be noted, actually, that the problem of Israeli/Palestinian support is something that has bedeviled the Labour Party for months, is now spilling over into the Conservative Party.
Says
We had Boris
Cornwall
Johnson
up there.
saying, you know,
Yeah, it's Cornwall,
just
UK.
keep it flowing, guys. But we also had a clutch of Tory peers saying, and Tory MPs saying, look, you know, we want to sort of stop supplying these guys with arms because of the fact they're being too brutal with them. I mean, in actual fact, the amount that the armaments that we supply is a very small, in the scheme of things, is a very small proportion, but the symbolism matters. I just do note that in terms of the politics of it, what was a problem for Keir Starmer is increasingly looking like a problem for Rishi Sunak as well.
Okay, Peter, thanks very much indeed.
Testosterone, dehydrotestosterone.
Madness.
What is the relationship?
Crazy time in the world. I mean, my phone's on 20% battery. It needs charging, so I may have to end the video and charge the phone up and then do some more videos later. Thank you for all joining me, and I will be back again to do more videos. I'm very addicted to doing videos. Anyway, thanks for all joining me. Take it easy and see you next one. Peace. See you later. Take it easy.